And we're going to hear from some of those students a little bit later on. But you know, workers in the skilled trades are needed to fill more than 800,000 jobs in Michigan between now and 2022. That is the latest data from the Workforce Intelligence Network. But if the talent gap is not closed, economic growth in the state could slow down. Joining me now to talk about the skills gap are Jeff Donofrio. He's the Executive Director of Workforce Development in the city of Detroit. Jeff, it's good to see you. Alycia Meriweather, she's the Deputy Superintendent of the Detroit Public Schools Community District. Welcome, Alycia. It's good to see you as well. And David McGhee, he's the Program Director at the Skillman Foundation. Welcome to all of you. David, it's good to see you. You know, so as we kick off this conversation, Jeff, I'd like to start with you and kind of just give us an overview when we talk about skills gap and specifically looking at the city of Detroit and what jobs need to be filled and what kind of unemployment we have. Can you give us a little bit of a big picture?
Sure, happy to do that. So clearly we're here at Randolph for a reason. There's just thousands and thousands of jobs being created by all the development projects in Detroit. You look at what's happening downtown, you look at what's happening all across the city in infrastructure, the Gordie Howe Bridge coming online. We need to make sure that Detroiters can take those jobs, that there are people who have the skills, that have the resources to be able to connect with that opportunity. So when you look at Detroit as a whole, we have about 430,000 adults that live in this city, but only about half of them are actually employed. A whole bunch of them are out of the workforce, and certainly there are a lot of barriers that they face to get back in.
Like what?
So you can think about transportation. Obviously, the lack of a really, truly mass transit system that's regional here in Detroit is an issue. Housing insecurity, childcare, and of course, there's always the skills as well, the skills gap that exists. You know, a good example of this that we tried to help solve was driver's responsibility fees. So we identified this as a gap, you know, that over 350,000 Michiganders and 76,000 Detroiters had their license removed because they didn't pay their driver's responsibility fees. It was a tax that was put on top of a ticket by the legislature and the governor in 2003. Mm-hmm. That's $120 million worth of debt in Detroit. 18% of our adult population that can't drive to work. That's a huge barrier. But we have a solution that Lansing passed a bill. It's going to be all eliminated in October. We actually have early forgiveness options for those who are going through workforce training. So we're actively engaged in trying to knock down that barrier for Detroiters.
Okay, and so that's just one.
That's just
one of a couple
yeah.
barriers when you take a big look at it. David, let me ask you: when we look as a whole in terms of the future of where our state is heading, not just the region but the state, and we say we've got to do something about talent and a skills gap, where do we need to start first?
Yeah, that's a great question, because this skills gap that we're having a conversation on is actually rooted in a couple of other gaps, right? An opportunity gap that exists and also a well-being gap. Right, so when you talk about the state overall, 1 in 5 children across the state of Michigan are living in poverty. You look at the city of Detroit, over half of the young people here are living in poverty as well. So as a foundation, what we want to do is work with partners, some of them that are actually joining us today, to do a couple of things. 1, identify the gaps that exist. 2, using our philanthropic voice to be willing to stand in the gap, right, and be a voice for the voiceless. And then lastly, provide some funding and resources to bridge those gaps and divides that exist.
And I think that's what we were talking about a little bit earlier when we talk about now there needs to be a coordinated effort. You've got the city, you've got philanthropy, and Alycia, you know, looking at schools, because everyone will say, well, we've got to educate our kids, and if they're falling down on the job, they're not ready for the jobs of the future, no matter where they want to go. So what is DPSCD doing?
So I think several things that have been mentioned are absolutely true. First, the alignment between business and education, the city, all of these entities coming into alignment, philanthropy, also all of those things coming into alignment to support children, young people, getting skills, getting education, and then moving on into the workforce. So we're talking about career and college readiness, and I think that is an incredibly important point to make. Is sometimes when we talk about college readiness, we tend to think that training that happens at a place like Randolph is not connected to that. It's the total opposite. Actually, there's great value in the training that happens here at Randolph, and whether students choose to go straight into the workforce or they choose to get their associates or another certification or go on to a 4-year degree, that should be their choice. And I think a lot of what we're really talking about here is an opportunity gap and making sure that students have opportunities and choices. And once you give students opportunity and choice, what they do with those things is really, the sky is the limit. But when we limit students' choices and we limit students' opportunities, we change the trajectory that they could have taken. And so I think when we look at the development that's happening here at Randolph and the collaboration between business, industry, philanthropy, what we're really talking about is breaking down barriers of all sorts to make sure that young people have opportunities and choices. Because true poverty means you have neither of those. True poverty means you don't have opportunity and you don't have choice. And so when we start adding choice and opportunity, you're really addressing poverty and you're addressing the other issues at its root. And you cannot change the outcome unless you address the root cause.
So let me ask you this. When you start talking to kids about what kind of path they may want to go on, or even start educating them about what paths are even available to them, what age are we talking about in terms of where you have to start getting them to focus or getting them to see certain things?
I think you have to start very, very young with exposure. So meaning you don't know what's possible unless it's shown to you. And so at very young ages, and this is one of the things we're really working on in DPSCD, is really looking at how do we make sure that students are exposed to as many options as possible starting at a young age. That means all kinds of things from career days and career explorations all the way up until I think about middle school is where you drill down more deeply into career pathways. And so one of the things that DPSCD is doing in the next couple of years will be building out career pathways and career academies at all of our high schools, Randolph, Bright Hop, Go Lightly. Our career techs will be included in that. But the idea of building out career pathways that start in middle school so that, and many adults can relate to this, when you're taking educational courses in high school, sometimes the key question is, why do I have to learn this?
Do I really need
Do
this?
I really need to know this?
Really need
and
this.
so if you can really help students to understand what they want to do, and then again, give them options, opportunities, and choices in terms of following that career pathway, their work at the high school level becomes relevant.
Okay, so we see the opportunity and the choice. Jeff, talk to me then about what the city is doing in terms of taking that and then looking as a whole at workforce development, specifically what you're doing in the city.
Yeah, so how do we leverage that? How do we take that career pathway training that's already being implemented at the school system and extend that into the summer, right? So that's our Grow Detroit's Young Talent Summer Youth Employment Program. 8,000 young people, 14 to 24, who get their first job through the city, who are able to learn those work readiness skills, who are able to find, potentially a career pathway that they want to pursue in an industry. We also take the CTE schools here. So Randolph being the first one, where, of course, we have high school students in the daytime, but then adults in the evening, too, working in the same classrooms, learning the same skills, and trying to fill that talent pipeline. So how do we make sure that we have a holistic view? We are removing barriers at the high school system and through the K through 12 system, and then making sure that we're doing that also for adults.
So David, when we hear about this and we think about opportunity and we think about some of the barriers like poverty and taking a larger picture about where the city can be now in the next 5 years from now, when we have a kind of attack from all sides, what do you think that we should be able to see if we start working in conjunction here?
I think we will begin to see a community where we can institutionalize luck. And what I mean by that, nowadays, opportunity in and of itself and success for many, many young people is random. So how do we institutionalize luck and democratize opportunity in and of itself? The work around Grow Detroit's Young Talent, the work that's taking place here at Randolph, our role in the funding community is to help enable those pieces, right? Because programs are powerful, but policy and practice is progress. So what does that look like? That looks like the 8,000 young people that are having their very first job through Grow Detroit's Young Talent, engaging the funding community and Skillman as a partner, raising our hand and say, you know what, we understand in order for that to happen and for that to continue to happen, there's quite frankly, to be transparent, some non-sexy things that need to be taken care of, such as infrastructure. So that's where the foundation has come in. So those 8,000 young people, you'll see us come in to undergird that to ensure that young people are getting paid via a debit card in the payroll processing so they don't have to get a paper check and go to a check cashing place and things like that. So how do we systematize some of these things that actually take place? So beyond the program, over the next 5 to 10 years, these things become woven into the fabric of how the city of Detroit does business.
And Alycia, is it really also changing the way we think about certain things as well? And not saying, well, this is this, and this is how people should feel about skilled trades, and then you people should go to college, that there is a different way that we need to start looking at things, that the different paths might not be specific to everyone.
You're absolutely correct. That really gets to one of the roots of the issues is around mindset and understanding that opportunity can be found in multiple ways. And one thing I often say to parents is, you know, the biggest thing you can do for your child is to find out what they're interested in and then help them to find the opportunities that will get them to that end goal, whatever it is. And so I used to say to my students when I taught middle school not far from here, I would say to them, as long as you do something that is productive and is not illegal or immoral, I'm good. You know, so find something that interests you, and then let me try to find the ways that connect opportunities to that dream. And never crush a child's dream. I mean, I think one of the saddest things I've ever seen is when someone who has a true passion for something, an adult says to them, why are you thinking about doing that? That is not a good idea. You should do this. That is really not the role of an adult to crush children's dream. The role of an adult is to figure out ways to support children in finding their path, making sure that they do have opportunities that are institutionalized. And as a DPS graduate, as a lifelong Detroiter, this is exciting because when you start talking about institutionalizing opportunity and chances, and you look at removing barriers as a system, then you're talking about changing the game.
And because the path also might change, and saying it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay if that path changes. I'm going to let you have the last word here, Jeff, because really we're looking at the success of the city that we all see changing and we see growing and we see some different opportunity, but there needs to be more opportunity for people who are here because you want people employed, you want to grow a tax base, and you want a thriving city.
Yeah, I think, you know, what we've all said is, right, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And so how do we systematize it? How do we make sure that the K through 12 system, the community college system, the workforce system that the city runs is all working together, leveraging each other? So we're giving the opportunity for Detroiters, young and old, to have a career that is going to be family sustaining and that's going to make our city and them successful.
All right, well, thanks to all of you.